So I got asked to talk about the long road to getting a drug to patients, and very pleased to have Jeremy Welton here from UCB. I don't know the rest of your team, are they here still?
It's just me.
Oh, thank goodness the senior person's here. Okay, so I'm telling you about two drugs. Neither are precision medicines, okay? So neither are precision medicines. So the story I'm going to begin with is the hot one of the last few days, fenfluramine. And you can see there it was a hot new diet pill. It was in 1973. It was discovered as an appetite suppressant. And everyone went mad with it because they were going to lose weight. But then they developed cardiac valvular thickening, so the cardiac valves got thickened, or a very serious lung disease called pulmonary hypertension. And so it got taken off the market. But there were a few patients with Dravet syndrome, and the diagnosis wasn't even known yet, I don't think, but they'd done really well on fenfen, it was called. And so they got the King, I think, of Belgium at the time to put out a royal decree to allow these individuals to stay on the drug. And some very smart child neurologists in Belgium, Burton Ceulemans and Leven Lagar, both kept saying this drug is special. And that's the story. And the good bit of the story is that the story I'm going to tell you is that the drug doses are much less. So they do not seem to have these side effects, maybe a few cases, but generally much safer. So it just shows you when you've got advocates like that pushing the story in. And it has two actions. The main one, I think, is its serotonin receptors. It's several different receptors and also a sigma-1 receptor. So I'm just going to tell you my involvement in that story, but really it's about telling you what an ordeal it's been for me and for Briley, my nurse, at a personal level. For me, it's been well more than 10 years, and we have had to fight. And I guess it's a way of showing you that this just doesn't happen overnight, that we need you to help contribute to the discussion. We need you to help with the trials, of course, but you need to do what's right for you. I'm not, no pressure, but just to say it's really important. VC is me being trendy, saying venture capitalists that bought fenfluramine had multiple discussions with me and several other people who were working a lot in Dravet syndrome over several years, trying to plan how they were going to use this investment. And then in 2016, so 9 years ago, fenfluramine trials began. And I'm not going to spend too much on this because you've heard a bit about it today, but these were randomised, double-blind, placebo-controlled trials. These are gold standard. Half the group get drug, half the drug group get a sugar tablet. Now, Piero mentioned the trials. The word trial is abused in that, oh, I'll just give you a trial of some Panadol. That's not a trial. A trial is a scientific exercise where you're comparing a drug with a no drug, which is what placebo is, except they get a sugar tablet. And there's a huge placebo effect on everything we take. It's about a 33% chance that if I give you something and you think, believe me, you'll get better. So it's really important. And this is part of the problem around the cannabis story, because there's so much belief in cannabis. But there are proper trials of cannabis. Anyway, a blinded controlled trial means half the patients stay on standard therapy and get the new drug, and the other half on standard therapy and get the sugar tablet. So why do you do it? You do it because you do your trial for 3 months, and then you get access to a drug like fenfluramine, where an adult dose is $107,000 a year for 1 year. So that's why you're doing it, to get access to a drug. But I'm doing it because I want rigorous clinical data. I want good research statistics that show me that drug works. And so this is all done with computer algorithms which say you're blinded. I don't know if you're getting the drug. My trials team, and they're here, they're waving over here. We've got 4 of our trials nurses here, and they don't know if you're getting the drug, and Piero doesn't know. The pharmacist behind the pharmacist knows. So that's what blinded means. No one knows, because we all want it to work, don't we? We all want it to work. So why bother going into a trial? It could have terrible side effects and it could be bad for you, and we don't know. No one's had it, or only a few people have had it in the world. And so why do it? The reason is you might get access to a drug that you won't be able to get for 10 years, like the story I'm telling you now. And the real reason you do it is after that 3 months of drug or placebo, you get drug. That's why you do it, because you get that $100,000 drug, and it might be more by the time these drugs get through. You get much more frequent medical reviews. So if you come to our Austin team, you'll probably be sent every 2 weeks-ish, often in that 3 months part, usually always by the nurses and maybe by some of our junior neurologists. And then the companies usually provide drug afterwards. That's the thing. They might provide it for a year. They usually provide it ongoing, particularly if their drug's working. And for us, we're lucky they'll often fly patients from interstate because we've got rare diseases. We need to get patients with that. So that's when the trials began, and I was very fortunate. I was not fortunate one way. The ethics held us up 11 months, which I was very unhappy about. So at the end of the day, I've got 5 kids with Dravet and 5 adults with Dravet, defined as over 18 years, and they were testing it in Lennox-Gastaut syndrome too. So I wanted to tell you the story of this patient of mine who has a DEE, and she was about 30 at the time. She was profoundly impaired. She didn't walk or talk, but she had Lennox-Gastaut and she had 2 or 3 tonic seizures every night. This drug, when we gave it to her at 30, stopped her seizures. Her first seizure was on the first day of life. They took a flash. In those days, they were taking flashes. And they took a photo, and she had a myoclonic jerk, and she had a gene called CHD2. So she lived another 10 years. She's died last year at 40. And when I rang her mum, fantastic family, the mum said to me, "I'm so pleased you got her into that trial. She had 10 years of no seizures. She died of pneumonia." But the point is that everybody deserves these treatments, and it really made a big difference. So then these trials were with a company called Zogenix. Trials were highly successful. So here are the data, and we contributed to these data. And here you're looking at the difference from placebo of 2 different doses of fenfluramine in the reduction in mean monthly convulsive seizures. So this is just looking at convulsive seizures, of which there are several types. It's 2 weeks of going up and then 12 weeks of stability. I always think the drug companies want to go up too fast because you get more side effects. It's better to go up slowly. And you can see that on the higher dose, there was almost 64% greater reduction in the patients on fenfluramine compared to the placebo. That's impressive. And if you look at this, it's 0.2. So that's very good. And then if you look at this one, we often use this, it's called a responder rate. It means a 50% reduction in seizures. And I like it because it helps you compare different drugs. So lots of the drugs we use will have a responder rate of 30-40%. Here, look at this, the high dose, 70%. That's extraordinary. So the good news was the trials were highly successful. The bad news was they refused to come to Australia. So I'd done the trials in Australia, but they would not come here. And they got it reimbursed in Europe and they got it reimbursed in America, but we were too small fry and they wouldn't come here, which made me very unhappy. Anyway, then Riley and I were looking after this little run of gorgeous 2 to 4-year-olds or 1 to 4-year-olds, and they were going to stages every month or 2 months or 3 months and in the ICU, and we were getting more and more distraught. And I hadn't wanted to have inequity, if the truth be known. I didn't want to have somebody seeing me getting this drug when somebody in northern Western Australia wasn't. I hadn't done anything at a local level because I thought it wasn't fair, and I kept thinking Zogenix would go to market, go to the PBS, the health system, but they weren't. So then starts another road. So I said to Briley when Zogenix said no, Briley, start looking at how much this is costing us. And so put Briley to work, and she did medical record analysis of, I don't know how many patients she did, do you remember? 10 patients, and she looked at admissions, ambulance trips. Everyone knows ambulance trips are very expensive. And then she did an economic analysis, and you can see just an example of 2 patients of those 10 that the admission costs over 12 months were almost $55,000 and $77,000, a lot of money. So then we asked about the cost of fenfluramine, And you can see here, these were because they weren't adults. I said $107,000 a year, but these are little people, and so they don't cost as much. So then for the first time in my career, I just made these slides, so it's all rather last minute, but I went to the High Cost Drug Committee at the Austin, which usually deals, it's a big adult hospital, small paediatric centre. I asked them for a drug. I've never done that. The cancer people usually occupy this team. And we brought the Briley data to them and they approved it. So you can see that took 6 months, but they gave us only 6 patients. That made a big difference to our patients. But what I found, and I didn't anticipate this, and I think that's one of the great things about a life lesson, is that because we got it, it put pressure on my colleagues around other centres in Australia to get it. And then we found that other major hospitals around the country, not everywhere, but quite a few of my colleagues went to their high cost drug committee and they got it. So a lot more than 6 patients got it. Not a great number, but a lot more. Back to, I think you've heard this story, but just to show you, and I will disclose who it is, it's Gemma. She was one of our poster children round it, but you can see here her story, which you've heard about, so I won't spend too long on it. But we got the genetic testing quite quickly, and she was SCM1A positive. And you can see here she got the fenfluramine as soon as we could get our hands on it. And in Briley reviewed 19 admissions and she'd had 3 intubations, which means going from the Austin to the Children's for intensive care. And you can see little Gemma there, she wasn't eating very well, but she's still beautiful. And here's the sort of data that these trials show us. This is before fenfluramine, which Leah's put in beautifully there, and you can see that she was having 30 absences a day, as I recall, and sometimes more than that. And, yeah, more? More. A lot more, okay. And then you can see here she's having tonic-clonics here and here, so like monthly tonic-clonics, and they were long, they were really bad. So what did fenfluramine do? Well, that's your 6 months, and here's your next 6 months. And you can see the absence seizures went away, and she had and I think you said she'd had about, how many? You don't need to know if it's blinded. You don't need to know if they're on drug or placebo from the drug company when you see this, because it's really obvious. And then here are some other of her data where you can see the number of seizures and hospital presentations and different seizure types. And fenfluramine is started there. And the exciting thing is that she made developmental gains with walking, talking. She wasn't walking or talking, and she started walking and talking, and now she's a little chatterbox, I found the other day. This was the benefit of going to the Austin Hospital High Cost Drug Committee, and it's made a big difference to many patients. But then the really good news happened. UCB bought Zogenix. Now, I put in there that they bought it for $2 billion, because that's money we can't even begin to think about. And that's the reality of this pharmaceutical industry. And they bought it for $2 billion and came out of the blue to me, and that was great news for us. Why was it great news? Because of Jeremy Welton sitting here, and he'd been working with the Australian epileptologists for many years. A lot of us have quite a high international profile, and boy, did we rattle his door down. We broke his door down, didn't we? And we just said, we need this drug, we need this drug, we need this drug. So then Jeremy set up a UCB compassionate access program, which I know a number of the families here have benefited from. And then on the 1st of May, just 2 days ago, it's finally on the health system for all children and adults with Dravet syndrome. There are rules, you have to be on 2 specific drugs, etc. But it's a really wonderful story, and as you can hear from me, it's more than 10 years. But wait, there's more. So what I'm also going to talk about is a drug that's similar to fenfluramine, and it's called bexicaserin, and it's just in 2 trials. We were involved with the early trials. It also works on the serotonin receptor, that's serotonin, 5-HT, and then 2C is the actual receptor subunit. And you can see here it's in brain, but this one is not in heart, and studies have shown it looks to be safe for the heart. And so they did a phase 1b/2a study called the Pacific study, and this was a double-blind placebo-controlled trial. Now, this is not the proper randomised controlled study. This is the study to say, is it safe and does it look like it has a signal that it works? They are about to go into the randomised controlled trial. They've just started elsewhere, but I'll finish up with that. And you can see different doses, and they use their drug, which at the time was called LP352, now has a good name, bexicaserin, and an open-label study. And they only looked at 52 patients. We were lucky to have quite a few in there. Bexicaserin for 43 and placebo for 9. So it's not equal numbers. The RCT, the randomised controlled trial, will be equal numbers. And you can see the side effects. They were much more likely to get sleepy. That's what somnolence means, sleepy, drowsy, decreased appetite, constipation, diarrhoea. But remember, we're talking 9 in the placebo group. And these were the other medicines they were on. So what about the outcomes? So again, you have to be careful not to read too much into this because of the low numbers, but here are the patients on the bexicaserin, minus 60% compared to minus 17%, so reduction in seizures. And then what they did that I was very excited about and I pushed very hard was to look outside Lennox-Gastaut and Dravet, because as most of your patients, your children, do not have either of those syndromes. And there are so many other severe DEEs. So we just said take all DEEs and look at them. So you can see there are 15 other DEEs that got bexicaserin, 4 that got placebo. You've got 17 with Lennox-Gastaut, 5 who got placebo, and only 3 with Dravet. But I think it's very interesting because it shows a very similar signal. You can't read too much into it, but it's optimistic. And does it last? Yes. So if you look at it when it goes out, it lasts the effect. And these are the patients who were actually on placebo, and then at the 3-month mark, they got the open-label drug, and you can see they come down to look like the patients who received the bexicaserin. What about safety? It looks pretty safe. The most reason people left the study was sleepiness, and a lot of these complications are in these patients anyway. Appetite's always a big deal, and we have to worry about that very carefully. So now we're just starting. 19th of September, the US FDA granted this drug orphan drug designation. And that means, I think it means you've got to have fewer than 1 in 2,000 individuals with the disease as a rare paediatric disease. And bexicaserin was called a breakthrough therapy, and they allowed the first time ever DEE basket trials. So that means all comers of DEEs, if they satisfy the inclusion criteria. So that's exciting because suddenly all the other patients with DEEs have a home where they can trial a drug, and it's for patients over 2 years of age into adult life. And they have 3 different studies, 2 main ones, Deep Ocean and Deep Sea. They did not get our deep from us, they found it themselves. And this one is all DEEs, and they want 320, and this is 160 Dravet patients. They have to show reduced countable motor seizures and many sites, 80 sites, and then they get into an open label extension. That means you get drug, that's what that means. And here are their criteria for this study, and we have been busy getting our house in order for this study. I've spoken to many families about it already, and we've just been waiting for the ethics. And the Dravet and the other ones, they're very similar in their design. So the exciting news is that the phase 3 trials were initiated in September 2024, not in Australia, but on the 14th of October, look, Lundbeck bought Longboard and paid a lot of money for it as well. And 2 days ago, we're the lead site for this study. We got approval to start recruiting in Australia. So I've spoken to lots of families about this trial. Our drug trial coordinators will be in touch with the right paperwork, because once we get approval, we can share that with you. So I just hope I showed you that getting drugs to patients is not a piece of cake. Thanks.